This is Big 12 Radio, Big 12 Today, heard on TuneIn, watched on Big 12 Studios. And our Friday Big 12 Power Hour features our newcomer series, taking a look at the top 5 newcomers specialists into the Big 12. We did a deep dive earlier this last month, taking a look at each and every Big 12 newcomer, and you can catch that in our Big 12 Power Hour, heard today and every day on Big 12 Radio on TuneIn. Just hit the TuneIn app and make sure you're listening each and every morning from 7 to 10 Central, 8 to 11 Eastern Time. And our Power Hour featured at 1 o'clock Central and 3 o'clock Central. We'll also have our interview, which you can catch live later on today, with Jared Calhoun, the new Cincinnati basketball coach. It's all part of our Friday Big 12 Power Hour. All right, let's talk a little Big 12 hoop, Big 12 baseball with Jamie Plunkett from Base 12 Sports. What's going on, Jamie? How are you?
I'm great, Ari. How are you, man?
Doing very well, thank you. Always appreciate your time, and excited for you to join us on this Friday, the final weekend series of the Big 12 regular season. So tell us what's at stake here.
Well, quite a bit. You know, you've got the top 2 teams in the conference facing off this weekend in Kansas and West Virginia, and that's really going to determine, you know, whether anybody has the ability to catch up with the Jayhawks, because Kansas currently leads West Virginia and Arizona State by 4 games. Obviously, 6 Big 12 games left to play. So West Virginia really needs to take all 3 of these to have a real shot at earning at least a share of the Big 12 regular season title. It feels, though, like it's almost inevitable at this point that the Jayhawks are going to take it. I know you're really happy about that.
What do you think that comes down to, that series?
I think it's going to come down to pitching. You know, with the Jayhawks, the way that they've been rolling the last couple of weeks, they've started to solidify their weekend rotation, and that's helped them create some of this space. With West Virginia, the questions about Chanson Cole and Dawson Montesa in that rotation have not really been big questions, but there's been a little bit of inconsistency there that has allowed a couple teams to rise up and catch the Mountaineers at times. Getting Max Yale back is obviously big for them last weekend, but this is 2 really good offenses that are going to be in a ballpark that's offense friendly, and so these pitching staffs are going to have to be up to the task of shutting each other down. And I think at this point, I'm going to kind of give the slight edge to the Jayhawks in that regard.
Jamie, how many tournament teams do you think there will be in the Big 12? And I guess what's at stake over these next couple of weeks in terms of teams that are on the bubble?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think at this point we can say that 6 are probably in, and the 7th one right now would be TCU. You know, they're slumping a little bit. They just got swept by Oklahoma State. 51 is their RPI coming into this weekend, which is not good. And sitting there 7th in the Big 12, you're kind of looking at the Horned Frogs and saying, okay, this is probably kind of where the cut line exists for the Big 12. Everybody ahead of them, Cincinnati, Oklahoma State, UCF, Arizona State, West Virginia, Kansas, all seem to be pretty safely in at this point, all over 30 wins, except for UCF, but they've got 15 Big 12 wins. It's the Horned Frogs that are really looking at, okay, they've got to make some noise over the last 2 weekends, or we could see as only 6 teams from the Big 12 make the field, and the Horned Frogs not be one of them, which would be pretty surprising. On the other end, Kansas has played its way, I think, into a national seed conversation, hosting a regional, in line to host a super regional. Their resume is pristine at this point, 20 conference wins, closing in on 40 regular season wins overall. So we might see an instance where, unlike last year where there were no hosts, the Big 12 gets a national seed host, but only has 6 teams in compared to 8 last season.
Wow. On TCU, this was a team that was certainly coming into the season one of the favorites. What's happened to Kirk Saarloos' team? Is it injuries? Why is TCU in this position?
Yeah, you can credit injuries a little bit for that, but I think a team like TCU, you would generally assume that the depth is a little bit more capable of sustaining some injuries. Now, losing your Friday guy is losing your Friday guy. You don't have multiple of those on your roster typically, but we've seen other Big 12 teams overcome losing their Friday night guy at times this year. UCF has done it. West Virginia has done it. Even Oklahoma State, who lost Hunter Watkins before the season even began and then lost Hudson Barrett midway through the year, has done it a couple of different times this season. So the Horned Frogs, it is injury related to an extent, but really it's an execution from the guys that they needed most. Sawyer Stroh-Snyder had a pretty rough April. The guys around it. Noah Franco is hitting 220 this year and hasn't pitched very well. A lot of these guys who they were expecting to lean on this season to get where they wanted to go just haven't performed over the last month or so of the year, and that's really kind of held them back.
Jamie, in terms of, Oklahoma State is surging, Cincinnati is surging. Cincinnati has a ton of top 100 wins in the RPI. What stands out about those two teams and what's led to their late season success?
I think for both of them, you've seen some of the young guys on the roster really start to grow up a bit. For Cincinnati, Enzo Infelice is one of my favorite freshmen in the Big 12. He, I think, has a legitimate chance to be Big 12 Freshman of the Year. And it's not often that you look at a roster that has a veteran catcher like Jack Natili and say, oh, the freshman catcher is going to come in and make some noise. But he's really held down the DH spot well, has developed into a consistent middle of the order bat for them. And he's played Bishop ball perfectly well. And Cincinnati has that unique ability to hit for power and also generate runs in a more traditional way. Nathan Taylor at the front of that rotation has been excellent. They've gotten some really good work out of the bullpen as well as of late. And then for Oklahoma State, they're getting healthy at the right time. Hudson Barrett came back a couple weeks ago, has been great in late inning roles. Noah Weck is another guy who's been lights out in high leverage situations. Mario Pesca has been phenomenal for them in a starting and a relief role. So the pitching has really supplemented what has been a dominant hitting lineup for the majority of the season. I mean, they're second nationally in home runs. They absolutely pounded TCU in that department over the weekend. So you've got a lineup that's really clicking. You've got a pitching staff that's getting healthy, and that's why they're catching some momentum right now.
Any other potential regional hosts in the Big 12?
I would say West Virginia probably has the best path, maybe Arizona State to being a regional host. West Virginia could really make some noise in that department with the series win in Lawrence this weekend. And Arizona State, hosting Oklahoma State this weekend, I think they could probably make some noise as well. I would look at both of those teams as probably really strong 2 seeds at this point. It would take quite a bit, I think, not only with them winning, but with some other teams maybe dropping off here in the SEC to get them guaranteed to be a regional host. But, I think it's possible for one, probably not both.
All right, Jamie, so the Big 12, let's say it is 6, and it was 8 last year. Is the strength of the conference at the top better than it was last year, or how would you compare the 2 seasons?
That's a really interesting question. Looking to last season, yes, you had 8 teams in the field. You didn't have any regional hosts, but you did have a team reach Omaha in Arizona. Now, that team is at risk right now of missing the Big 12 tournament because of a lot of different reasons. But Kansas, West Virginia, Arizona State, I think is a legitimately strong Big 3 for this league. And then you look at what happened in the middle of the pack this year, especially with BYU and Utah, both taking really big steps forward. And I could make a pretty good argument, I think, that the middle of the Big 12 is actually stronger than it was a year ago, but they've beaten themselves up a little bit more. And when you don't have this particular line of delineation of saying, okay, once a team reaches X number of conference wins, they're pretty much guaranteed to get in the NCAA tournament, like you do in the SEC, right? They have a 100% tournament pick rate once an SEC team gets to 13 conference wins. You don't see that in the Big 12. So there's this instance of, okay, well, maybe more teams are starting to get better, but that's actually hurting some of the teams that are typically guaranteed to get in the tournament because they don't have those guaranteed wins on the calendar anymore.
What else should we know about Big 12 baseball heading into next weekend's tournament? And, obviously not every team gets in, so who's fighting for the bottom of that to even get to Arizona?
Well, Houston's pretty much clear out of it at this point. They're the only one that I think is officially eliminated. Texas Tech and Arizona are the two battling for that 12th spot, that 12th seed. And it's going to be really interesting. Texas Tech got an important win last night against BYU. Arizona is facing an uphill battle this weekend. And, they host Houston, but at the same time, the Cougars are, playing for a little bit of pride. So I'll be interested to see who ends up getting that last spot, whether it's Arizona or Texas Tech. My money probably would be on Arizona right now, although I'm not much of a gambling man myself. And, other than that, really, it's just about how the middle of the pack sorts itself out. You've got Cincinnati and TCU both sitting there at 13-11. BYU just a half game ahead of Utah and Baylor for that 8th spot. We're going to see a lot of seeding issues kind of shake themselves out over the next 2 weeks, and that's going to determine, whether we see any rematches in Big 12 conference play and tournament play, or kind of define the paths for the top seeds to make it to the Big 12 final.
Jamie, how does Kansas lock up Dan Fitzgerald, I should say, for the long term? And what stands out? He was a guest on our show last week. He was phenomenal. Just what stands out about him when you look at his profile?
Man, he's an excellent guy. I had the chance to sit down with him a couple weeks ago as well. So they did sign him to a contract extension this past offseason. So that's step one, right? Lock him in long term, make the buyout competitive so that when an SEC or an ACC team comes calling, there's a financial challenge there for them. I think the second thing is how do you resource baseball at Kansas in a competitive way when it comes to Big 12 standards or even above Big 12 standards? Because Kansas football is on the rise, right? They're getting a ton of funding, getting a new stadium built. Obviously, we all know about Jayhawk basketball. That's never changing anytime soon. And so the landscape at Kansas specifically makes it really intriguing. Where do you sacrifice some things, or how do you ensure that baseball is funded competitively to keep a head coach of his caliber around? Now, he's I think, okay with not having all of the glitz and glam of some of the kind of blue blood programs in the country. You can just look at the guys that he's recruiting to the program and how hard he's hitting the JUCO ranks and helping that talent transition to D1. He likes a little grit and a little kind of that competitive edge. So maybe Kansas is the perfect scenario for him in that regard, where you kind of have to fight a little bit of an uphill battle for funding off the field and as well as on the field. But other than that, I mean, Kansas has really got a good track record of treating coaches well across sports. And so I think he's in a great situation right now. There will be phone calls coming this offseason as there were last year, but financially and contractually, I think he's in a good spot right now in Lawrence.
Great stuff as always. It's fun to visit every Friday with Jamie Plunkett, who covers Big 12 baseball with Big 12 with Base 12 Sports and the Flyover League. Go check out that podcast and check out the great work that Jamie is doing with Base 12 Sports. Jamie, thanks for your time. We'll talk to you next Friday.
Always a pleasure, fellas.
Jamie Plunkett joining us here on Big 12 Radio. It's Big 12 Today, heard on TuneIn, watched on Big 12 Studios. Yeah, look, I mean, I feel decent about Fitzgerald in Kansas long term. When we had him on, he talked about being incentivized, really wanting to build something and build something that's sustainable. And that's what he's doing, and it's what the opportunity he has at Kansas. If he wants to coach in the best league and get an SEC job, there will be ones that will open this offseason and every offseason subsequently, right? I mean, so ultimately it will be a decision he's going to have to make. But I think what Jamie just said there, like Travis Goff has quite the track record. I mean, the Big 12 softball coach of the year was Kansas's coach, a new hire by Travis Goff. He hired Dan Fitzgerald. It's just been a remarkable run here by the athletic director for KU.
Yeah, and when I think about Fitzgerald, the SEC, that came to mind, right? He was at LSU. That's scary to think about. But he was only there for 1 year, and he's a Midwest guy. Like, he was born and raised in Minnesota, right? He coached at Northern Iowa Community College and then Des Moines Community College in Iowa, and then he goes to Dallas Baptist. He has a very direct pipeline from Des Moines CC and the Dallas area to Kansas. So I think he's got everything he could potentially need at KU. If KU can financially put him in a position to where he's one of the highest paid coaches and making what he would make or close to at some point, because he's been so successful, he's kind of bounced around. Now, he was at Dallas for 9 years as an assistant, but outside of that, you look at before he got to that point and then 1 year at LSU before Kansas, he's going to want to settle down. And from everything I can gather, he loves Lawrence. And who wouldn't, right? When you have that home field advantage, when you have that fan support right there overlooking Allen Fieldhouse, like, you're not playing second fiddle.
Yeah.
There's something special about Hoagland Ballpark that I think is going to keep him there.
That's James Wesley. I'm Ari Tepkin. Our Big 12 Top 5 series continues next. We're breaking down the top 5 players at every position, and we're looking at the tight end next. It's Big 12 Today, presented by Modelo, heard on TuneIn and watched on Big 12 Studios.